I always believed that the hardest challenges in life were meant to be faced head-on. That belief was put to the test the night I had dinner at Ethan's house. Ethan, my boyfriend, was someone I had adored for his kind heart and gentle manner. His family's wealth never mattered to me, nor did I think it mattered to him. How wrong I was. The evening air was crisp as I approached the grandiose mansion that Ethan called home. Dressed modestly yet elegantly, I hoped to make a good impression on his parents, Meredith and Charles. Ethan, 3 years my senior, had often spoken of his parents with a mixture of respect and distance. I never understood why until that night. The dinner started off pleasantly enough. Ethan introduced me with a warm smile, and his parents greeted me with polite nods. The table was set immaculately, the silverware glinting under the chandelier's light. We exchanged pleasantries, and I felt a flutter of hope that maybe, just maybe, everything would go well. But as the conversation delved deeper, the atmosphere began to shift. Meredith's questions turned pointed, inquiring about my family, my upbringing. I answered honestly, talking about my mother, Lorraine, a self-employed woman who raised me single-handedly after my father's passing. "Oh, a single-parent household," Meredith commented, her voice laced with a hint of disdain. "That must have been challenging." "It was, but my mother is an incredible woman. She's my role model," I replied, trying to keep my voice steady. Charles, who had been silently observing until then, chimed in. "It's admirable, really. But you must understand, our family has a certain standard. Coming from a background like yours, well, it's not exactly ideal for someone in Ethan's position." My heart sank. The implication was clear, and the elitist judgment stung sharply. I looked towards Ethan, hoping for some form of support, but he avoided my gaze, his expression pained. Meredith continued, her words like venom masked in velvet. "It's not just about the social standing, dear. It's about stability, reliability. How can we be sure you won't bring financial burdens into the family? These things matter, you understand." I felt a mixture of anger and humiliation. "I assure you, my mother and I are quite self-reliant. We've never depended on anyone else financially." Charles scoffed. "Self-reliance is one thing, but fitting into our family, our world, is another. I'm sure you understand, it's not personal." But it was personal. It was a judgment not just on me, but on my mother, on everything we had ever worked for. Ethan finally spoke up, his voice barely above a whisper. "Mom, Dad, please, this isn't right." Meredith waved a dismissive hand. "Ethan, you're young. You don't see the bigger picture. We're thinking about your future." The dinner ended shortly after, the final course tasting like ash in my mouth. I left their house feeling smaller, diminished. Ethan tried to apologize, but his words were empty. He had remained silent when it mattered most. As I walked home, the night air no longer felt crisp but biting, each step heavy with the weight of realization. The man I loved was trapped in a world where wealth and status dictated worth, and I, coming from a modest single-parent family, was deemed unworthy. That night, I cried not just for the love lost, but for the injustice done to my mother, the strongest, most self-sufficient woman I knew. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a journey where the underestimation of a single mother and her daughter would be their gravest mistake. The silence of my home was a stark contrast to the turmoil in my heart as I closed the door behind me. The echoes of Ethan's parents' scornful words still lingered in my mind, replaying like a broken record. My mother, Lorraine, was seated at the kitchen table, her laptop open in front of her. She looked up, her sharp eyes softening as she took in my tear-streaked face. "Alina, what happened?" Her voice was laced with concern. I hesitated, my words catching in my throat. Telling her felt like admitting a defeat, an acceptance that we were somehow less than those who judged us. But Lorraine deserved to know. She had always been my fortress, my unwavering support. They looked down on us, Mom," I managed to say, the dam breaking as I recounted the evening's events. Each word felt like a weight lifted, yet the shame and anger only grew stronger. Lorraine's face hardened, her eyes sparking with a fire that I knew all too well. It was the same fire she wielded to build a life for us from scratch, the same determination that drove her to succeed against all odds. "Their arrogance will be their downfall," she said quietly, more to herself than to me. I looked up, surprised. "What do you mean?" She closed her laptop, her gaze meeting mine. I won't let them belittle my daughter, our life, without consequence. If they think their wealth and status put them above us, they're wrong. But how? I asked, a part of me fearing the repercussions. Lorraine's lips curled into a small, knowing smile. Their world revolves around reputation, connections. Well, they just severed a connection with someone more influential than they realize. I was taken aback. My mother, for all her strength, had always operated quietly, her successes never flaunted. But in that moment, I saw a glimpse of the power she truly wielded, a power born not of wealth, but of respect and hard-earned influence. Over the next few days, Lorraine set her plan into motion. She had always been meticulous, every decision calculated. This was no different. I watched as she made calls, her voice firm and authoritative. I didn't know the details of her business dealings, but I understood enough. She was severing ties with Charles's bank, a move that would send ripples through their elite circles. It's not just about hurting them, she explained to me one evening. It's about showing that we, too, hold power. The power of integrity, of standing up against those who think they can trample on others without consequence. Her actions spoke louder than any words of consolation could. In her resolve, I found my own strength reigniting. We might not have had their wealth, but we had something far more potent, dignity and the courage to defend it. As the days passed, the impact of Lorraine's decision began to surface. Rumors swirled, the once solid reputation of Charles's bank starting to waver. I didn't take joy in their misfortune, but there was a sense of vindication in seeing that even the mighty could be shaken. In that period of turmoil, Ethan reached out multiple times, his messages a mix of apologies and pleas for understanding. I read them, each word a reminder of his silence when it mattered. I couldn't bring myself to respond. The Ethan I thought I knew had vanished that night, replaced by a stranger bound by his parents' archaic values. It was a painful lesson, but a necessary one. In the face of adversity, true colors are revealed, and sometimes those colors are a stark contrast to what we believed them to be. The fallout from my mother's decisive action against Charles's bank was more rapid and impactful than I had anticipated. Within days, the once unshakable institution was the subject of hushed conversations and speculative glances in the circles that once revered it. Lorraine's influence, subtle yet formidable, had struck a chord in the very foundation of their elitist world. Ethan's attempts to reach out became more frantic, his messages a mix of confusion, desperation, and thinly veiled accusations. But it was a call from Meredith that brought the reality of the situation to a head. "Alina, you must convince your mother to reconsider her decision." Meredith's voice was tense, a far cry from the poised demeanor she had displayed at the dinner. "Why would I do that, Mrs. Harwood?" I replied, my voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "Because you're ruining us," she blurted out, the veneer of sophistication crumbling. "Do you have any idea what this is doing to our reputation? To Charles's career?" Her words, meant to intimidate, only served to highlight the depth of their entitlement. "Your reputation was built on looking down on people like us," I said calmly. "If it's being ruined, it's by your own actions, not my mother's." There was a pause, and I could almost hear Meredith grappling with the reality of her situation. "This is petty revenge, Alina. Is this what you want?" "It's not about revenge," I responded. "It's about respect, something you and your family clearly lack." Meredith's next words were a hiss, venom coated in fear. "You'll regret this. We'll make sure of it." The call ended with a click, leaving a silence that echoed with the threat. I sat there, phone in hand, a sense of foreboding washing over me. They were cornered, and cornered animals were dangerous. That evening, I recounted the conversation to Lorraine. She listened intently, her expression unreadable. "They're scared," she finally said. "Scared people make mistakes, but we won't. We'll stand our ground." Her confidence was a beacon in the murky waters of this battle we had inadvertently started. "What if they retaliate?" I asked, the worry evident in my voice. Lorraine's gaze was unwavering. "Then we'll be ready." "We've faced challenges before, Alina. This is just another hurdle. We're stronger than their threats." Over the next few days, the tension was palpable. Ethan's family was losing its grip on the pedestal they had placed themselves on. Rumors of financial instability and potential legal troubles began to circulate, further tarnishing the Harwood name. Then came the news that Charles had been forced to step down from his position at the bank. The details were murky, but the implications were clear. Lorraine's actions had set off a chain reaction that had led to his downfall. Despite the vindication, I felt no joy in their suffering. But there was a sense of justice, of karma playing out its hand. They had underestimated the strength of a single mother and her daughter, and now they were paying the price. As I lay in bed that night, the events of the past few weeks replaying in my mind, I realized that this was more than just a clash of social standings. It was a lesson in dignity, in the power of standing up for oneself against the tide of arrogance and entitlement. And as the dawn crept through my curtains, casting a soft glow in my room, I felt a sense of peace. The battle might not be over, but we had shown that we were not to be underestimated. The park was quiet, with only the gentle rustling of leaves breaking the silence. I sat on a bench, waiting. Ethan had asked me to meet him here, saying it was urgent. Despite my reluctance, curiosity, and a lingering concern had brought me here. Ethan arrived, his parents, Meredith and Charles, in tow. Their faces were a mix of anxiety and something that resembled fear. The sight of them, so different from the haughty figures at the dinner, was jarring. "Alina, thank you for coming," Ethan began, his voice strained. "My father, he's been suspended from the bank. The board is investigating the lost contracts and our family is under scrutiny. This is because of your mother's actions, isn't it?" I looked at him, the man I had loved, now a picture of desperation. "Ethan, my mother acted in response to how your family treated me. You were there. You heard what your parents said." Meredith stepped forward, her usual composure gone. "Alina, we understand we may have been harsh, but surely this retaliation is excessive. Charles's career, our reputation, it's all falling apart." I felt a surge of anger. "Harsh? You humiliated me, judged my mother and me for things beyond our control. You made us feel unworthy, and now you want sympathy?" Charles spoke up, his voice edged with panic. "Alina, please. If your mother could just retract her decision, or at least speak to the board, it would help clear my name." The audacity of their request left me speechless. They stood before me, not with apologies for their prejudice, but begging for relief from the consequences of their own actions. "My mother did what she felt was right," I said firmly. "She took a stand against people who looked down on us. The fallout from that is not our responsibility." "But Alina, think about what this means for us, for our family," Ethan implored, desperation creeping into his voice. I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the truth I had been denying. Ethan was a product of his environment, molded by the same prejudices and entitlement as his parents. "This isn't just about your family, Ethan. It's about respect, about recognizing the worth of every individual, regardless of their background," I said. "My mother taught me that, something your family clearly doesn't understand." The conversation went in circles, their pleas and justifications falling on deaf ears. I had heard enough. Standing up, I faced them with a resolve strengthened by the trials they had put me through. "I hope this situation gives you a chance to reflect on your actions and attitudes. Goodbye, Ethan." With that, I walked away, leaving behind the world that Ethan and his family represented. As I walked, the weight of the encounter hung heavy on my heart. But there was also a sense of liberation. I had stood up for myself and my mother against the prejudices that had sought to diminish us. It was a painful yet necessary step in reclaiming our dignity. The news of Charles Sterling's suspension from the bank and the subsequent investigation into his conduct became a topic of hushed conversations in our small town. It wasn't long before the repercussions of his downfall began to surface in more visible ways. Ethan's family, once the epitome of wealth and status, found themselves grappling with a reality they were ill-prepared for. I watched from a distance, detached yet unavoidably connected to the unraveling of their world. It was a bitter outcome, one that stemmed from a seed of prejudice and arrogance they had planted themselves. A few weeks after the confrontation in the park, I received an unexpected visitor at our home. It was Ethan, looking disheveled, a far cry from the composed individual I once knew. "Alina, please, you have to listen to me," he pleaded as soon as I opened the door. I hesitated, the sight of him stirring a mix of emotions within me. "Ethan, why are you here?" "It's my family," he said, desperation lacing his words. We're losing everything. My dad's career is in tatters, our assets are frozen, and now there's talk of selling the house. This is destroying us. His words should have stirred sympathy within me, but all I felt was a resounding echo of the injustice they had served me. Ethan, your family brought this upon themselves, I said, my voice steady. They judged and belittled us without a second thought. Your father's actions at the bank were his own doing. My mother simply chose not to ignore them. But we never thought it would come to this, Ethan argued, his eyes pleading. Surely there's something you or your mother can do. Talk to the board. Help clear his name. I felt a surge of incredulity. You're asking us to help the man who insulted my family, who questioned our worth. Ethan, do you even hear yourself? He looked down, unable to meet my gaze. I thought maybe there's still something between us. I shook my head. The final remnants of what I felt for him dissipating in the face of his continued inability to understand the depth of his family's wrongdoing. Ethan, there's nothing left between us, I said. Your family's downfall is a result of their actions, not mine or my mother's. You need to face that reality. His shoulders slumped, the weight of the situation seemingly dawning on him. Without another word, he turned and walked away, a symbol of the consequences that befall those who let prejudice guide their actions. As I closed the door behind him, a sense of finality washed over me. The chapter of my life that involved Ethan and his family had closed. They were now facing the karmic debt of their actions, a harsh yet fitting testament to the age-old adage, what goes around comes around. It was a harsh lesson, not just for them, but for me as well. In the world we live in, the battles we fight are not just for success or love, but often for respect and equality. And sometimes those battles leave deep scars and lasting changes. In the weeks that followed, the transformation within me became more pronounced. The ordeal with Ethan and his family, while painful, served as a crucible, forging a new sense of self and purpose within me. I had witnessed firsthand the power of standing up against injustice, and the strength it takes to not be swayed by intimidation or societal pressures. My mother, Lorraine, became even more of a beacon in this newfound journey. Her unwavering support, coupled with her bold actions against Ethan's family, had not only defended our dignity, but also showcased the true extent of her influence and character. As the Sterling family grappled with their new reality, my mother and I found a renewed sense of connection in our small but resilient world. We often spent evenings discussing not just our future plans, but also the broader implications of what we had experienced. One important lesson from all this, Alina, my mother said one evening, is that true strength lies in integrity and the courage to stand up for what's right, even if it means standing alone. Her words resonated deeply with me. The journey had been tumultuous, but it had instilled in me a stronger sense of self-worth and an understanding of the impact of our actions on others. In this period of reflection, I also came to terms with my feelings towards Ethan. The love I had for him was overshadowed by the disappointment and disillusionment of his inaction. I realized that sometimes love is not enough, especially when it comes at the cost of one's self-respect. As I moved forward, I began to channel my energies into my career, taking cues from my mother's tenacity and business acumen. The challenges were many, but each obstacle served as a stepping stone, honing my skills and resolve. The story of Ethan and his family became a distant memory, a chapter in my life that had closed, leaving behind valuable lessons. In its place, a new chapter was beginning, one where I stood at the helm, guided by the principles that my mother and the recent experiences had ingrained in me. The transformation was not just internal. Our community's perception of us had shifted as well. The respect and admiration for my mother grew, and with it a newfound recognition of my own capabilities. We were no longer just the underdogs. We were symbols of resilience and integrity. As the chapter of vengeance and upheaval closed, a new chapter of growth and empowerment opened. It was a testament to the fact that even in the face of adversity and prejudice, one could emerge stronger, wiser, and more determined. The seasons changed, and with them, my perspective on life and its myriad challenges. The bitter experience with Ethan and his family had become a catalyst for a profound transformation, both in my personal and professional life. I had emerged not just unscathed, but stronger, more resolute. My mother, Lorraine, continued to be my pillar of strength. Her decision to stand up against the Sterlings had not only defended our honor, but it also sent a powerful message to our community. We were not to be underestimated or belittled. Her actions spoke volumes about the values we stood for: integrity, respect, and resilience. As I advanced in my career, the lessons I had learned from that ordeal guided my decisions. I approached challenges with a newfound confidence, drawing upon the strength that the confrontation with Ethan's family had instilled in me. The respect I earned was not just for my professional capabilities, but also for the principles I upheld. In the quiet moments of reflection, I often thought about Ethan. I harbored no ill will towards him, but rather a sense of pity. He was a product of his environment, a prisoner of his family's archaic beliefs and expectations. I hoped that the upheaval his family faced would someday lead him to his own path of self-discovery and change. The Sterling family's fall from grace became a topic of the past, their plight a mere footnote in the town's history. They had paid a steep price for their prejudices and arrogance, a reminder to all about the impermanence of wealth and status when devoid of humanity and respect. As for me, the scars of that experience had healed, leaving behind a strength that became an integral part of my identity. I was no longer just Alina, the girl from a modest background. I was Alina, a woman of substance shaped by her experiences and the values instilled in her by a strong and courageous mother. In this journey, I had learned that true empowerment comes not from external validation, but from the recognition of one's own worth and the courage to stand up for it. It was a lesson that would guide me in the years to come, in both my personal and professional life. As I looked ahead, I felt a sense of excitement for the future. The road would undoubtedly have its share of obstacles, but I was ready to face them head-on, armed with the lessons from my past and the unwavering support of my mother. This was not just the end of a chapter, but the beginning of a new, promising phase of my life. A life lived on my own terms, with dignity and pride.